From children who could barely see over a courtroom railing to teenagers who plotted massacres in their bedrooms, these are cases that forced the justice system to ask a question it was never built to answer. What do you do when the perpetrator is too young to drive, too young to vote, and in some cases, too young to even understand what a life sentence means? Some of these offenders were 15, some were 13, one was 7 years old. Here are the 20 youngest serial killers in history. Eric Smith.
Disbelief as their quiet street was turned into a crime scene. Derek Roby was beaten to death.
Autopsy reports show he died from blows to the head.
In the summer of 1993, 4-year-old Derek Roby was walking to a day camp at a park near his home in Savona, New York. It was the first time his mother had ever let him go anywhere alone. The park was 1 block away, same side of the street. He never made it. A 13-year-old local boy named Eric Smith spotted Derek and lured him into a nearby patch of woods, telling the younger boy he knew a shortcut to the park. Once they were out of sight, Smith strangled Derek, bludgeoned him with rocks, and sodomized him with a stick. He left the body and went about his day. Derek's mother reported him missing after the park staff said he never showed up, and searchers found his body a few hours later in those same woods, just yards from where he was supposed to be playing. The community assumed the killer was a stranger passing through on the nearby interstate. But within days, a family friend grew suspicious of Smith's behavior. He had been asking odd questions about the case, including what would happen if the killer turned out to be a kid. His family brought him to police, and he confessed. He told investigators he had been bullied relentlessly and wanted to take his anger out on someone. Smith was tried as an adult and convicted of second-degree murder in 1994. He received 9 years to life. After being denied parole 10 times over nearly 2 decades, he was granted release in October 2021 and walked out of prison in February 2022 at age 42. He remains on parole for life. Craig Price.
Florida officials will not provide Eyewitness News a list of who has visited him while incarcerated.
By the time Craig Price was arrested in Warwick, Rhode Island, he was 15 years old and already had 4 bodies to his name. That made him the youngest serial killer in United States history at the time, and his case would eventually reshape juvenile justice law in the state. His first crime happened on the 27th of July, 1987, when he was just 13. He broke into the home of Rebecca Spencer, who lived 2 houses away, and stabbed her 58 times. Police had no real leads and the case went cold. 2 years later, on the 1st of September 1989, he broke into another home in the same neighborhood. He murdered Joan Heaton by stabbing her nearly 60 times, then turned on her 2 daughters, Jennifer and Melissa, killing them both. The neighborhood panicked and police began searching door to door. When detectives questioned Price, they noticed a cut on his hand. He failed a polygraph, and a search of his home turned up bloody knives and clothing. He confessed to all 4 murders without remorse, even mimicking the dying sounds of the girls. But here's where it gets complicated. Under Rhode Island law at the time, a juvenile could only be held until age 21. So despite 4 murders, Price was set to walk free in a few years. That sparked outrage and legislative reform, but the new laws couldn't apply retroactively. His own violent behavior in custody is what kept him locked up. He attacked a correctional officer in 2009 and stabbed a fellow inmate in 2017. That second incident led to a guilty plea for attempted murder and a 2 5-year sentence. He remains incarcerated in Florida. Michael Hernandez. On a February morning in 2004, Michael Hernandez lured his classmate and close friend, Jaime Goff, into a handicapped bathroom stall at Southwood Middle School in Palmetto Bay, just outside Miami. He told Jaime he had something to show him. Once inside, Hernandez pulled out a knife, stabbed Goff more than 40 times, and slit his throat. He then hid the knife in a secret compartment inside his backpack and walked to his next class as if nothing had happened. Staff found Jaime's body shortly after, and a teacher noticed blood on Hernandez. That led police directly to him. What investigators uncovered was deeply disturbing. Hernandez had been researching serial killers online for months, studying figures like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. He kept a journal with a list of people he wanted to harm, including his own sister. He had actually tried to lure a second classmate, Andre Martin, into the bathroom the day before, but Martin got uneasy and walked away. The very next day, Hernandez killed Goff instead. At trial in 2008, his defense entered an insanity plea, but the jury rejected it, and convicted him of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life. In 2016, following a Supreme Court ruling barring mandatory life sentences for juveniles, Hernandez was brought back for resentencing. But recordings of his jail calls showed him joking about faking tears for the judge, and prison records revealed homemade weapons in his cell. The judge upheld the original life sentence. Hernandez died in prison in April 2021 at 31. An autopsy revealed he suffered from a heart condition. James Fairweather.
Something like that. It was like that. Just fast asleep where he was drunk.
In the spring of 2014, the town of Colchester in Essex, England, became the hunting ground of a 15-year-old boy. Nobody suspected. James Fairweather was quiet, bullied for his prominent ears, and struggling at school with undiagnosed dyslexia. But beneath that, something far darker was taking shape. On the 29th of March 2014, James Atfield was found in Castle Park after being stabbed over 100 times. Atfield had a brain injury and had been lying on the grass after drinking when Fairweather attacked him. The violence was so extreme, the BBC reportedly said the details were too gruesome to describe. 3 months later, on June 17, Fairweather struck again. His second victim was Nahid Al-Manea, PhD student from Saudi Arabia, studying at the University of Essex. He stabbed her in the abdomen and then forced the knife into both of her eyes. He later told police the voices in his head told him she was not allowed to see evil. With 2 random victims and no connection between them, police initially feared there could be 2 separate killers. Fewer people ventured outside and fear took hold. But Fairweather didn't try again for nearly a year. Carrying a knife and wearing surgical gloves, he was actively hunting for a third victim. At trial, he claimed diminished responsibility due to psychosis, but a court psychiatrist found no evidence to support it. The jury convicted him unanimously of both murders in April 2016. Alyssa Bustamante. In October 2009, Alyssa Bustamante did something most people cannot wrap their heads around. She dug 2 graves in the woods behind her neighborhood in St. Martins, Missouri, days before she even had a victim. Then, on the evening of October 21, she had her younger sister invite 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, who lived just 4 houses down, outside to play. Once Alton arrived, Bustamante led her into the woods alone. She strangled the girl, slit her throat, and stabbed her 8 times in the chest. She buried the body in one of the pre-dug graves, covered it with leaves, and went home. When Alton didn't come back, her mother reported her missing. Hundreds of law enforcement officers and volunteers searched for 2 days in cold rain before Bustamante led police to the shallow grave. Investigators recovered a journal from her room. The entry from the day of the killing described the act in casual, almost detached language, calling the experience amazing and writing that once you get past the initial hesitation, it becomes enjoyable. She closed the entry by noting she had to leave for church. A Missouri State Highway Patrol sergeant testified that Bustamante said she simply wanted to know what it felt like to end someone's life. She took a plea deal and pled guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. The judge sentenced her to life with the possibility of parole, plus a consecutive 30 years for the armed criminal action. She must serve at least 35 years before becoming eligible for parole. She was denied in July 2024, and her next hearing is set for 2029. T.J. Lane.
Prior to and consecutive to the 4 prison terms on the base offenses specified the 3-year terms on each of the 4 firearm specifications.
On the morning of the 27th of February 2012, students at Chardon High School in Ohio were gathering in the cafeteria before classes. Some were eating breakfast. Others were waiting for a bus to the nearby Lake Academy, an alternative school. T.J. Lane was supposed to be on that bus. Instead, he stood up with a handgun and opened fire. He fired 10 rounds at a table of students chosen at random. Daniel Parmenter, 16, and Demetrius Hewlin, 16, were killed. Russell King Jr., 17, was declared brain dead shortly after. 3 other students were wounded. Lane fled the building but was chased out by a teacher and a football coach, and police arrested him near his car within minutes. Lane never provided a motive. Prosecutors said the only explanation was that he was simply an evil person. He came from a troubled home, was living with his grandparents, and rarely opened up about his personal life. Friends described him as quiet and normal, and nobody saw this coming. On the 26th of February 2013, Lane pled guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of attempted aggravated murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. His sentencing hearing became one of the most shocking courtroom scenes in recent memory. Lane unbuttoned his dress shirt to reveal a white t-shirt with the word "killer" scrawled across the front, the same thing he reportedly wore during the shooting. He addressed the victims' families with a profane statement and raised his middle finger to the courtroom. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without parole. The Bever brothers. On the night of the 22nd of July 2015, the caller, believed to be Daniel Bever, reported someone was attacking his family. When officers arrived, they found a girl suffering from multiple stab wounds. She identified her own brothers as the attackers. Inside, police found 5 bodies. David Bever, 52, and April Bever, 44, had been stabbed dozens of times. Their children Daniel, 12, Christopher, 7, and Victoria, 5, were dead from multiple stab wounds and blunt force trauma. A 2-year-old sister was found unharmed. The attackers were Robert Bever and Michael Bever, the victims' oldest sons. They had used hatchets and survival knives in a coordinated assault planned well in advance. During the investigation, police learned the brothers had ambitions far beyond their own home. They had discussed launching a cross-country killing spree to gain infamy, and Robert told officers that taking more than one life made him feel like a god. He even laughed while describing the attacks to detectives. Robert pled guilty in September 2016 in exchange for prosecutors not pursuing the death penalty. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional life term for the assault on his surviving sister. Michael's case went to trial. The jury convicted him on all counts, and he received 5 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole, since constitutional guidelines restrict mandatory life without parole for juveniles. He also received 28 additional years for the attack on the surviving sister. Nathaniel, Brazil. On the 26th of May 2000, the last day of the school year, Nathaniel, Brazil, was sent home from Lake Worth Middle School in Florida for throwing water balloons. But instead of staying home, Brazil retrieved a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun and rode his bicycle back to school. He went to the classroom of his English teacher, Barry Grunow, a husband and father of 2. Brazil wanted to speak with 2 girls inside the classroom. When Grunow stood in the doorway and told him he couldn't come in, Brazil pulled the gun and pointed it at the teacher. Security camera footage captured those tense seconds. He fired a single shot, hitting Grunow in the face and killing him instantly. Brazil was an honor student with perfect attendance who had never been in trouble before. He had even been selected to become a student mediator the following year. So the idea that this kid could walk back onto campus with a gun and shoot his own teacher left the entire community in shock. At trial, his defense argued the shooting was accidental, that Brazil had only pulled the gun to force the teacher to let him talk to the girls. But prosecutors pointed to evidence suggesting otherwise. Classmates told investigators that Brazil had talked about shooting the counselor who suspended him and told one student to watch the news. The jury convicted him of second-degree murder and aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison, followed by 7 years of probation. Lionel, Tate.
Waited for the ambulance. Crosset Tate went on to say that she had no idea Lionel had been involved in Tiffany's death. When she told her son that the little girl had died, she testified he, quote, looked at me like he was shocked.
The case of Lionel Tate still sparks debate about how the justice system should handle children who commit violent acts. On the 28th of July, 1999, in Pembroke Park, Florida, old Tate was left downstairs with 6-year-old Tiffany Unick, while his mother, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper, went upstairs to sleep. The 2 children had been watching television. At some point, whatever was happening between those 2 kids turned fatal. Tate, who weighed 170 pounds, beat the 8-pound Tiffany so severely that she suffered a fractured skull, a lacerated liver, a broken rib, and internal hemorrhaging across her body. Doctors counted 35 separate wounds. When Tate's mother came back downstairs, the girl was unconscious and not breathing. At trial, the defense argued Tate had been imitating wrestling moves he saw on television and that her death was accidental. Prosecutors pointed to the sheer extent of the injuries and argued this was a sustained, brutal beating, not a wrestling accident. The jury agreed. In January 2001, Tate was convicted of first-degree felony murder. In March of that year, at 14 years old, he was sentenced to life without parole, making him the youngest American ever to receive that sentence. His conviction was overturned on appeal in 2004 because the court found his competency should have been evaluated before trial, given his age and learning disabilities. Tate accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder and was released on 10 years of probation. But in 2005, he violated that probation by robbing a pizza delivery man while armed with a firearm. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Barry Loukaitis.
More than 20 years ago, a 14-year-old boy named Barry Loukaitis walked into his Moses Lake Middle School and opened fire. He killed 3 people and wounded a 4th before being stopped.
On the freezing morning of the 2nd of February, 1996, classes at Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington, started 2 hours late because of the cold. That delay gave Barry Loukaitis extra time at home, where his parents were in the middle of a bitter divorce. Loukaitis left wearing all black, a trench coat, cowboy boots, and a cowboy hat. Concealed beneath the coat were his father's .30-30 hunting rifle. He walked 1.5 miles to school. During 5th period, he walked into his algebra class and started shooting. He killed classmates Manuel Vela and Arnold Fritz, and wounded student Natalie Hintz in the stomach. He then turned the rifle on his algebra teacher, Leona Kyers, and shot her in the back as she wrote on the chalkboard. With 15 terrified students trapped in the room, Loukaitis reportedly said something about this beating algebra, a remark linked to Stephen King's novel Rage, which investigators found on his nightstand, alongside 27 other King books. He then announced he was taking hostages. Gym teacher John Lane heard the gunfire from 2 doors down, rushed in, volunteered himself as a hostage, then wrestled the rifle away and pinned the boy down until police arrived. Loukaitis was tried as an adult. Jurors rejected his insanity defense and convicted him on all charges. He was originally sentenced to 2 life terms plus 205 years. Following a 2012 Supreme Court ruling banning mandatory life sentences for juveniles under 16, he was resentenced in April 2017 to 189 years. He waived all future appeals. Kip Kinkle. On the 20th of May, 1998, Kip Kinkle was suspended from Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, after admitting he had a stolen handgun in his locker. That same evening, he shot and killed both of his parents, Bill and Faith Kinkle, inside their home. His father was a Spanish teacher. His mother taught at a nearby school. By all accounts, they had tried to get him help. He had been seeing a psychologist and was on medication. But Kinkle had been hearing voices since he was 12, voices that told him to hurt people, and he was obsessed with knives, guns, and explosives. When the suspension threatened to expose the secret world he had been building, everything collapsed. The next morning, he drove to Thurston High and walked into the cafeteria carrying his father's semi-automatic rifle, 2 pistols, and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition. He opened fire, spraying 50 rounds across the room. 16-year-old Ben Walker and Mikael Nikolausen were killed. 25 other students were wounded. Classmates tackled and subdued him. Even after being pinned down, he pulled a knife strapped to his leg and stabbed a police detective during his arrest. He pled guilty to 4 counts of murder and 26 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 111 years and 8 months without the possibility of parole. His legal team has challenged the sentence multiple times, arguing he was a juvenile with a treatable mental illness, but every appeal has failed, including at the Oregon Supreme Court. Andrew Golden. The Westside Middle School shooting near Jonesboro, Arkansas, stands out for one reason above all else: the age of the shooters. Andrew Golden was 11. His accomplice, Mitchell Johnson, was 13, and on the 24th of March 1998, that afternoon, Golden pulled the fire alarm, triggering a full building evacuation, then ran to a wooded area about 100 yards from the school's exit where Johnson was already waiting. They had loaded a stolen van that morning with weapons taken from Golden's grandfather, including multiple rifles and handguns, along with hundreds of rounds of ammunition. As students and teachers filed outside through the locked exit doors, Golden and Johnson opened fire from the tree line. They killed 4 students, Natalie Brooks, Paige Ann Herring, Stephanie Johnson, and Brithny Varner, all between 11 and 12 years old. Teacher Shannon Wright was also killed. 10 others were wounded. Police arrested both boys within minutes as they tried to flee. In their possession were multiple fully loaded firearms and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. But Arkansas law at the time did not allow juveniles to be tried as adults. So despite killing 5 people, both were convicted as juveniles and sentenced to detention until they turned 21. The Jonesboro prosecutor later stated that if it weren't for their ages, he would have sought death sentences. Golden was released in 2007. He changed his name to Drew Grant and moved to Missouri. He was killed in a head-on car crash in July 2019 at age 33. Johnson was released in 2005, but later arrested on federal drug and weapons charges and served additional time. Charles Andrew Williams.
On September 10th, Santana High School shooter Andy Williams will make his case for parole. For the first time since the shooting 23 years ago, victims and families will confront Williams.
On the morning of the 5th of March 2001, Charles Andrew Williams walked into a boys' bathroom at Santana High School in Santee, California, carrying a revolver taken from his father's locked gun cabinet. He shot a student inside the restroom, then stepped into the hallway and began firing. Williams was calm and methodical. He returned to the bathroom multiple times to reload before continuing to shoot. By the time 2 off-duty police officers visiting the school that day responded, 2 students were dead and 13 people were wounded. The victims were Brian Zucker, Randy Gordon. 11 other students and 2 staff members were also hit. Williams had recently moved to California from Maryland and was struggling to fit in. He was small for his age and being bullied. Friends said he had talked about doing something violent and reportedly told one of them he planned to pull a Columbine. Some thought he was joking. He also tried to speak with a school counselor before the shooting, but was told to go back to class because the office was full. In June 2002, he pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and 13 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 50 years to life. Under California's youthful parole law, he had a parole hearing in 2024, but the board denied his release. In January 2026, a judge granted a resentencing that could transfer his case to juvenile court, though the district attorney has appealed. Luke Woodham.
I got the pillow, went to the kitchen, got a butcher knife, walked to my mom's room, threw over her head, and stabbed her.
On the morning of the 1st of October 1997, Luke Woodham woke up and stabbed his mother, Mary Ann Woodham, to death inside their home in Pearl, Mississippi. An autopsy later revealed 11 slash wounds and 7 stab wounds, including to her heart and lungs. Woodham told investigators he couldn't remember doing it. After killing her, he took his older brother's rifle, got in his mother's car, and drove to Pearl High School. Wearing a trench coat to conceal the weapon, he walked into the commons area and opened fire. His first target was his ex-girlfriend, Christina Menifee. He killed her and fellow student Lydia Dew and wounded 7 others before heading for the parking lot. That's where Assistant Principal Joel Myrick stepped in. Myrick had retrieved his .45 caliber handgun from his truck, confronted Woodham after the teen lost control of the vehicle, and held him at gunpoint until police arrived. His intervention likely prevented additional casualties. At trial, the defense painted Woodham as a vulnerable teenager, manipulated by an older classmate named Grant Boyette, who dabbled in occult practices. Woodham claimed Boyette ordered him to commit the attack, but prosecutors argued the violence was premeditated, and the jury rejected his insanity defense in both separate trials. For his mother's murder, Woodham received a life sentence. For the school shootings, he was given 2 more life sentences plus 7 consecutive for the attempted murder convictions. He is serving 3 life terms plus 140 years and is eligible for parole in 2046. Luis Reyes Jr.
When Luis Reyes learned that he'd be in jail for the next 30 years, you knew just by his body language the bailiffs would have to hold him.
Before dawn, on the 8th of April 2009, 3 individuals broke into the home of a woman in Port Richey, Florida. Among them was Luis Reyes Jr., along with Carlos Hernandez and Jonathan Rodriguez. A 4th individual, Sean Mouse, had helped them gain access after earning the elderly woman's trust by doing chores for her, though he was not present during the attack. The woman woke up and walked out of her bedroom, but the intruders dragged her back to bed. They held a pillow over her face, and she later told deputies she heard one of them ask whether she was dead. They sexually assaulted her and ransacked the home. Reyes was charged as an adult with 2 counts of sexual battery, home invasion robbery, and 6 counts of burglary connected to other break-ins in the area. He had previously turned down a plea deal, offering 30 years in prison. In July 2010, at the age of 16, Reyes pled no contest in an open plea with no agreed-upon sentence. He faced up to life in prison. The judge sentenced him to 30 years, a term that was later reduced to 25 years on appeal. He remains incarcerated. Hernandez also pled no contest and received 30 years. Mouse, who facilitated access but was not present during the assault, pled guilty to burglary and grand theft and received 180 days in jail, followed by house arrest and probation. Rodriguez's case was handled separately. Mason Cisk.
Tonight, a family dealing with mixed emotions after a convicted murderer. Mason Cisk is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
On the night of the 2nd of September 2019, police received a call from a home in Elkmont, Alabama. The boy was reporting that someone had broken in and attacked his family. But that story fell apart quickly, because the boy making the call was the one who did it. Mason Cisk had shot and killed 5 members of his own family while they slept. His father, John Wayne Cisk, was 38. His stepmother, Mary Cisk, was 35. His 3 younger half-siblings, 6-year-old Kane, 4-year-old Aurora, and 6-month-old Colson, were all shot in the head. Cisk initially told police he was in the basement playing video games when he heard gunshots and ran outside to see a vehicle pulling away. Investigators didn't buy it, and he eventually confessed. The case was disturbing because of the calculated nature of the crime and the ages of the victims. An infant and 2 small children executed in their beds, and the teen who did it initially staged the scene as a home invasion. His first trial ended in a mistrial after FBI experts unlocked his stepmother's phone, introducing new evidence. A second trial in April 2023 ended with a guilty verdict on all counts of capital murder. Because Cisk was 14 at the time, the death penalty was off the table. The judge had 2 options: life with parole after 30 years, or life without. Judge Chadwick Wise chose the latter, calling the crime ghastly, disturbing, and draped in unmitigated evil. Cisk showed no reaction when the sentence was read. Amarjit Sada.
नाम अमरजीत सदा उर्फ मेघुलवा, पता बेगूसराय बिहार, काम 8 साल में बना serial killer.
This case takes everything on this list and pushes it to an extreme most people will have trouble processing. Amarjit Sada, from a small village in Bihar, India, is frequently cited as the youngest serial killer in recorded history. He was between 7 and 8 years old when he committed 3 separate murders, all of them infants. The details are difficult to confirm with precision because the case unfolded in a rural, impoverished part of India with limited media coverage. But the general account is consistent. Sada's first victim was his own infant cousin. He reportedly strangled the baby and later admitted it to his family. But instead of contacting authorities, his parents treated it as a private matter and punished him themselves. His second victim was his own baby sister, 8 months old. Again, his family covered it up. It was his third killing that finally brought police. In 2007, a neighbor left her 6-month-old daughter at a village school to nap. Sada took the child, strangled her, and buried her body. When the mother returned and the baby was missing, villagers recalled seeing Sada carrying the infant away. When confronted, Sada reportedly admitted to all 3 murders while smiling. He led police to the burial site. Psychologists described him as a sadist who derived pleasure from inflicting harm and diagnosed him with a conduct disorder. Under Indian law, a child cannot be sentenced to prison or death. Sada was placed in a juvenile facility for the maximum statutory duration, reported as 3 years. His current whereabouts are unknown, and whether he was rehabilitated remains unclear. Jordan Brown.
Fiancé, when he was just 11 years old, is getting a hearing to determine if he deserves a new juvenile court.
This case is different from every other one on this list because it ended with a full exoneration. On the 20th of February 2009, in Woodham, Pennsylvania, Kenzie Houck was found dead in her bed, shot once in the back of the head with a shotgun. She was 8.5 months pregnant, and her unborn son also died. Police focused on Jordan Brown, Houck's future stepson who lived in the home. Investigators found a .20 gauge youth shotgun in his bedroom, a Christmas gift from his father for hunting. They concluded it was the murder weapon and arrested the boy within 16 hours of the crime. Brown was initially charged as an adult with first-degree murder and criminal homicide. He maintained his innocence from day one and never wavered. His father asked him repeatedly over the years whether he had done it, and Brown never changed his story. He said the morning of Houck's death was completely normal. After more than 3 years of legal proceedings, his case was transferred to juvenile court. In April 2012, a judge adjudicated him delinquent, the juvenile equivalent of a guilty verdict. He was held in juvenile custody. But his legal team kept fighting. In July 2018, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court unanimously overturned his conviction in a 5-0 decision. The justices found the evidence insufficient, ruling that the shotgun found in his bedroom could just as reasonably have been excluded as the murder weapon. After more than 7 years in custody, Jordan Brown was released at age 20. Alec McKini.
2 suspects are in custody, 18-year-old Devin Erickson and a 16-year-old teenage girl who prefers to be called Alec McKini. Both are now being charged as adults.
On the 7th of May 2019, 2 students walked into a British literature class at STEM School Highlands Ranch, a charter school south of Denver, Colorado, and opened fire. One of them was Alec McKini. The other was Devin Erickson. McKini had planned the attack for weeks. He told investigators afterward that he intended to target classmates who had mocked him. He and Erickson broke into a parent's gun safe during lunch and retrieved 3 handguns and a rifle. Inside the classroom, Erickson pulled a gun from a guitar case and opened fire from one end. McKini fired a revolver from the other side until it was empty, hitting 4 students. 18-year-old Kendrick Castillo, just days from graduation, charged at one of the shooters and was fatally shot in the chest. His actions, along with those of 2 other students who also rushed the gunman, are credited with preventing further casualties. 8 other students were wounded in the attack. Both shooters were taken into custody. McKini was charged with 46 counts, including first-degree murder, conspiracy, and multiple counts of attempted murder. In February 2020, he pled guilty to 17 charges as part of a plea agreement. At his sentencing that July, he apologized to the victims and their families and said the harm he caused was more than anyone should have to bear. He urged anyone considering a school shooting to get help instead. The judge sentenced him to life with the possibility of parole after 40 years, plus 38 additional years for other convictions. Because he was a juvenile, life without parole was off the table under Colorado law. Jacob Ind. In December 1992, Jacob Ind and his friend Gabriel Adams carried out a planned attack on Ind's mother, Pamela Jordan, and stepfather, Kermode Jordan, in their Woodland Park, Colorado, home. The attack involved guns, knives, and bear mace. Both victims were asleep in their bedroom, and the violence lasted several minutes. What makes this case complicated is what Ind claimed happened before it. He said he and his brother had endured years of severe physical, emotional, and sexual abuse from both his mother and stepfather. His brother, Charles, corroborated these allegations, and one of Pamela Jordan's own sisters described the household as cold and loveless, and said she believed the abuse occurred. Prosecutors pushed back. They pointed out Ind never reported abuse to police after the murders, and that he had spent 3 months planning the killings before enlisting Adams to help. They called the attack premeditated and deliberate. Ind was tried as an adult in 1994 and convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. For over 2 decades, he fought for a new sentence. The breakthrough came in 2017 when a judge ruled his defense attorney had violated his constitutional right to testify by blocking him from the stand at trial. His convictions were vacated. Instead of facing another jury, Ind pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and was resentenced to 60 years. With more than 26 years of time served credited, he was granted parole and released in September 2020.